The crown slipped from King Cadogan's fingers and clattered against the marble floor, the sound echoing through the hushed throne room like a death knell. Every wolf in the sacred hall turned to stare at the entrance, where a hooded figure stood silhouetted against the dying sunlight, a small child clutched against their chest. The Omega scent hit him like a physical blow, wild honey and autumn rain, a fragrance he'd buried deep in his memories 3 years ago. If you're already hooked and you want to know whether Cadogan will choose his throne or his true mate, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Subscribe because this story is about to get absolutely wild. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when this Omega finally speaks after 3 years of silence. The coronation had been perfect until that moment. Absolutely perfect. High Priestess Branwen had been in the middle of the ancient blessing, her crystalline voice carrying the words their ancestors had spoken for 1,000 years. The gathered alphas from every territory stood in their ceremonial robes, bearing witness to Cadogan's ascension to the highest position in the realm. His chosen mate, the elegant Alpha Rhiannon, stood beside the throne in her silver gown, her practiced smile never wavering as she prepared to be crowned Luna Queen. But now everything had turned to chaos. The Omega pulled back their hood with one trembling hand, and Cadogan felt his wolf howl inside his chest. Taliesin. The name burned through his mind like wildfire, even though he hadn't allowed himself to think it in years. Those storm-gray eyes that had haunted every dream, every quiet moment when his guard was down. The sharp angles of that face that had once pressed against his shoulder in secret, in stolen moments in the forest where no one could judge them for breaking every rule about an Alpha King and a silent Omega who owned nothing but their dignity. The child in Taliesin's arms couldn't have been more than 2 years old. Dark curls fell across a small face, and when those tiny eyes opened, they flashed with an unmistakable golden light. Wolf eyes. Cadogan's eyes. Every wolf in that throne room understood what they were seeing. Bloodlines didn't lie. That child carried the mark of Gwinnett, the ancient birthright that passed only through the direct line of kings. Rhiannon's gasp cut through the silence, sharp as breaking glass. Her carefully constructed composure cracked, and something ugly twisted her beautiful features. She'd spent 5 years positioning herself for this moment, cultivating alliances, proving her worth as a strategic match. And now this silent Omega dared to walk in carrying proof of a claim that superseded everything. High Priestess Branwen lowered her hands, the blessing dying on her lips. At 90 years old, she'd witnessed countless coronations, scandals, and secrets, but even she looked shaken. Her ancient eyes moved from Cadogan to Taliesin to the child, reading the truth written in blood and scent and the undeniable pull of mate bonds that the gods themselves had forged. Cadogan's beta Owain moved first. Loyal to a fault, he stepped forward with his hand on his sword hilt, his voice carrying authority even in the face of the impossible. The ceremony is sacred. No interruptions are permitted. Remove yourself and the child immediately. But Taliesin didn't move. Couldn't move, perhaps. Their legs trembled beneath the simple traveling cloak, caked with mud from what must have been days of walking. How far had they come? How long had they been traveling with that small child, fighting their way to the capital for this single moment? The Omega's lips parted, and Cadogan held his breath. Taliesin hadn't spoken in 7 years, not since the trauma that had stolen their voice the same winter their family had been slaughtered by rogues. Everyone knew the story. The silent Omega of the borderlands who communicated only through hand signs and written words, who kept to themselves and asked for nothing from anyone. No sound emerged, but Taliesin's hand moved to the leather satchel at their side, pulling out a folded document. The paper trembled as they held it up, and Cadogan recognized the seal even from 20 feet away. His seal. His handwriting. The contract he'd written in secret 3 years ago, promising to protect Taliesin, to return for them after he'd secured his position, after he'd dealt with the council's demands for a political marriage. They'd all been lies he told himself to justify abandoning his true mate. This is preposterous. Rhiannon's voice dripped with venom as she descended from the dais, her silver gown flowing like mercury. She'd transformed from poised Lunian waiting to predator in seconds. Some Omega appears with a child and a forged document, and we're supposed to halt a coronation. The desperation is almost pitiful. But Cadogan saw the fear beneath her rage. Rhiannon was brilliant, cunning, powerful in her own right, but she wasn't his true mate. Everyone in this room could sense the bond between him and Taliesin, thick as smoke and undeniable as gravity. The child was merely confirmation of what every wolf's instincts already screamed. "Let me see the document." Branwen's voice cut through the rising murmurs. The High Priestess commanded respect that even kings couldn't ignore. She moved with surprising grace for her age, crossing the marble floor to stand before Taliesin. The Omega handed over the paper with shaking hands, and the child stirred against their chest, making a small sound of distress. Instantly, Taliesin's arms tightened protectively, and Cadogan felt his wolf surge forward, desperate to go to them to protect what was his. He forced himself to remain still. 3 years ago he'd made his choice. He'd chosen duty over love, politics over his mate, the crown over his own happiness. He'd told himself it was the noble thing to do, that an Omega with no voice and no family couldn't possibly survive the viciousness of court politics, that he was protecting Taliesin by staying away. More lies. Branwen studied the document for a long moment, her weathered fingers tracing over the words, the seal, the signature. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "This is authentic." Written in King Cadogan's hand, bearing his personal seal, dated 3 years and 2 months ago. It's a formal promise of protection and provision, signed and witnessed under the old laws. The throne room erupted. Alphas shouted over each other, some demanding explanations, others calling for the Omega's removal, still others questioning whether the coronation could proceed. Owain moved to Cadogan's side, his voice low and urgent. "My king, what do you want me to do? This situation requires immediate management." What did he want? Cadogan's wolf knew exactly what it wanted. It wanted to cross that floor, gather its mate and child into its arms, and dare anyone to try to separate them again. But the man, the king, the alpha who'd been groomed since birth to put duty above all else, that part of him calculated the political catastrophe unfolding in real time. Every alliance he'd built, every treaty he'd negotiated, every promise he'd made to secure peace among the territories, all of it had been contingent on his marriage to Rhiannon. Her family controlled the eastern territories, the richest lands and the largest armies. Without that alliance, the fragile peace he'd worked years to establish would crumble. Border wars would ignite again. Wolves would die. But Taliesin was his mate. The gods themselves had chosen them for each other. And that child, that small perfect child with his eyes and his bloodline, that was his heir. His firstborn. The future of everything his family had built for generations. Rhiannon moved closer to the throne, her political instincts sharp as ever despite her anger. "My king, surely you can see this as a manipulation. Any Omega could produce a child and claim it's yours. This is nothing but an attempt to disrupt the stability you've worked so hard to create. Send them away, and let's complete the ceremony as planned." She wasn't wrong about the political implications, but she was desperately wrong about everything else. Taliesin's eyes met his across the throne room, and in that gaze, Cadogan saw everything he'd tried to forget. Long nights tangled together in a hidden cabin at the border. Promises whispered against skin. The moment he'd first scented his true mate and felt his world realign around this singular Omega who spoke with their eyes and hands and touch instead of words. The morning he'd left while Taliesin slept, too cowardly to face them while breaking every promise he'd made. The Omega's hand moved, forming the signs Cadogan had learned in secret during their time together. 3 signs, simple and devastating. Our. Brennan. Little King. They'd named their child Little King, and Cadogan felt something crack inside his chest. The boy stirred again, and this time his eyes opened fully, scanning the throne room with an intelligence too sharp for his age. When his gaze landed on Cadogan, something flickered in those golden eyes, recognition perhaps, or instinct, or the call of blood to blood. The child reached out one small hand toward him and made a sound, not quite a word but full of longing. Cadogan's feet moved before his mind could stop them. 3 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled in an instant. He descended from the dais, ignoring Rhiannon's sharp intake of breath, ignoring Owain's urgent whisper of warning, ignoring every alpha in that room who watched him throw away everything for an omega and a child. He stopped 3 feet from Taliesin, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into their features, the desperation in their eyes, the way they swayed slightly on their feet as if they might collapse at any moment. How long had they been traveling? How had they survived the journey with a small child and no pack protection? Taliesin. His voice came out rough, breaking on the name like a wave against rocks. The Omega's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't let them fall. Instead, they shifted the child slightly, and Cadogan saw the marks on their arms, the scars from fighting off something or someone. Fresh wounds, barely healed. His wolf snarled with rage. Someone had attacked his mate. Someone had dared to harm what belonged to him. Who did this to you? The words emerged as a growl, and the temperature in the throne room seemed to drop as his power filled the space. Every wolf present felt the weight of their king's fury. Taliesin's hands moved rapidly, signing words that made Cadogan's blood run cold. Rogues. Hunting us. They know. About Brennan. About his bloodline. Not safe. Came to you. Only safe place left. Branwen stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. If what this Omega says is true, if rogues are hunting the child because of his bloodline, then this is a matter of royal succession and security. The boy's heritage must be confirmed before any decisions are made. His heritage is written in his face, Cadogan snapped, unable to tear his eyes from his son. His son. The word felt foreign and precious and terrifying all at once. Anyone with eyes can see he carries my blood. Circumstantial, Rhiannon countered, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. We require proper testing, proper verification. The High Council must convene. This Omega could be lying about the rogues, could have orchestrated this entire scene to disrupt the coronation and stake a claim they have no right to. Taliesin flinched at the accusation, pulling Brennan closer, and Cadogan felt his protective instincts surge so powerfully, he almost shifted right there in the throne room. His wolf pushed against his skin, demanding to be released, to show everyone exactly who this Omega belonged to. Enough! His command silenced the room instantly. My son and his bearer are under my protection. Anyone who disputes this will answer to me personally. Owain, arrange rooms in the royal wing. Branwen, summon the High Council for tomorrow morning. Rhiannon. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her step back. The coronation is postponed. The throne room exploded with protests, but Cadogan raised his hand, and his power rippled through the space like thunder. Alphas dropped their eyes. Betas bowed their heads. Even Rhiannon, for all her fury and wounded pride, couldn't hold his gaze. 3 years ago, I made a choice that I told myself was honorable. I chose duty over my mate because I believed that was what a king must do. I abandoned the one person the gods chose for me because I was too afraid of what it would cost me politically. His voice carried to every corner of the throne room, and he let them all hear the self-condemnation in his words. I was a coward. I was wrong. And I will not make that mistake again. He closed the distance to Taliesin, and the Omega scent overwhelmed him. Home and safety and everything he'd been missing without even acknowledging the emptiness. Carefully, telegraphing his movements so he wouldn't startle them, he reached out and touched Brennan's small hand. The child's fingers wrapped around his thumb immediately, and Cadogan felt his wolf settle for the first time in 3 years. I'm here now, he said softly, speaking only to Taliesin, ignoring the dozens of witnesses to this moment. I'm here and I won't leave again. I swear it on my crown and my life and everything I am. No one will hurt you or our son. Never again. Taliesin's face crumpled, and the tears they'd been holding back finally fell. Their free hand moved to sign something, but their fingers trembled too badly to form the words. Instead, they simply leaned forward, resting their forehead against Cadogan's chest, and he wrapped his arms around them both. His mate and his child, the family he'd tried to sacrifice for a crown that suddenly felt worthless compared to this. The throne room remained silent, shocked into stillness by their king's confession and display. Owain recovered first, moving to begin implementing Cadogan's orders. Branwen watched with knowing eyes, a small smile playing at her lips as if she'd seen this outcome written in the stars long before anyone else. But Rhiannon stood frozen on the dais, her silver gown suddenly looking like armor that had failed her, her carefully laid plans crumbling to dust. When she finally spoke, her voice shook with a mixture of rage and something that might have been grief. "You would throw away everything for this. Years of alliance building, of peace negotiations, of securing our territory's futures. You would risk war for an Omega who can't even speak and a child we haven't verified." Cadogan lifted his head, meeting her gaze steadily. "I would risk everything to right the wrong I committed. And if the territories choose war over accepting my true mate and legitimate heir, then perhaps we need to rebuild the entire system from the ground up." It was treason against everything he'd been taught, everything he'd built his identity around. The Alpha King didn't choose love over duty. The ruler didn't prioritize personal bonds over political necessity. But as he stood there with Taliesin trembling against him and Brennan's small hand wrapped around his thumb, Cadogan realized he didn't care about any of those old rules anymore. Some things were worth burning the world down for. Branwen's voice rang out, formal and final. "The coronation is postponed by royal decree. This matter will be brought before the High Council at dawn tomorrow. Until then, King Cadogan's protection extends to the Omega Taliesin and the child Brennan. Any wolf who challenges this will face charges of treason." The High Priestess's word carried the weight of religious law, and even the most ambitious alphas knew better than to openly defy her. The gathered wolves began to file out of the throne room, their voices rising in heated discussion the moment they crossed the threshold. This scandal would spread through every territory by nightfall. The political implications would be catastrophic. Cadogan discovered he didn't care about that either. "Can you walk?" he asked Taliesin softly, feeling how heavily they leaned against him. The Omega shook their heads slightly, and Cadogan saw the truth in their eyes. They'd pushed themselves far beyond their limits to get here, running on nothing but desperation and determination. Now that they'd reached safety, their body was finally giving out. Without hesitation, Cadogan swept them into his arms, careful to support both Taliesin and Brennan. The Omega weighed almost nothing, and fresh anger surged through him. How long had they been starving? How long had they been running? "I've got you," he murmured against Taliesin's hair. "Rest now. You're safe." As he carried his mate and child out of the throne room, Cadogan caught Rhiannon's expression, pure hatred mixed with betrayal, and he knew he'd made an enemy who would spend every breath seeking revenge. The eastern territories would likely withdraw their support. Border skirmishes would resume. The council would fight him at every turn. None of it mattered. Not anymore. Owain fell into step beside him, his expression troubled but loyal. "The guest quarters in the royal wing are being prepared. I've stationed guards at every entrance. No one will reach them without going through your personal security first." "Good. Send for the royal physician. I want both of them examined immediately. And food, real food, not formal court meals. Whatever Taliesin needs." Cadogan paused, looking down at the Omega in his arms. "And send for Morfydd. Taliesin will need someone who understands sign language to help communicate with the staff." Morfydd was an elder Omega who served as the palace's head of household management, one of the few wolves in the capital fluent in the hand signs. She'd been the one who first taught Cadogan the language 3 years ago, though he'd never told her why he wanted to learn. The walk to the royal wing felt endless and too short all at once. Cadogan wanted time to stop, wanted to hold his mate and memorize the feeling of having them close again. But he also needed to get them somewhere private, somewhere safe where Taliesin could rest and recover. Brennan had fallen asleep against Taliesin's chest, his small face peaceful in a way that suggested he felt the safety his Omega parent had been promising him. The child's scent was pure and innocent, untainted by fear despite whatever horrors they'd survived on their journey here. 2 years old. Cadogan had missed 2 years of his son's life. First steps, first words. Assuming Brennan could speak despite having a nonverbal parent, all those precious moments lost because he'd been too much of a coward to fight for his mate. The guilt threatened to consume him, but he pushed it down. There would be time for self-recrimination later. Right now, his family needed him. The Royal Wing's guest quarters were luxurious by any standard, but they felt inadequate for what Cadogan wanted to give his mate. Still, the rooms were secure, private, and comfortable. Morphed already waited inside, her silver hair braided in the traditional Omega style, her kind face creased with concern. "My king," she greeted him. Then her eyes fell on Taliesin and widened. Recognition flashed across her features, followed by understanding and something that looked like vindication. She'd never believed his lies about learning sign language for diplomatic purposes. "Morphed, this is Taliesin and my son, Brennan. They'll be staying here under my personal protection. I need you to help them communicate with the staff, ensure they have everything they need." Cadogan carried them to the bedroom, laying Taliesin gently on the bed without disturbing the sleeping child. Taliesin's eyes had already drifted shut, their body finally surrendering to exhaustion now that they were safe. Cadogan carefully removed Brennan from their arms and laid the boy on the bed beside them, watching as both Omega and child instinctively curled toward each other even in sleep. His heart physically ached looking at them. "I'll arrange for clothes and supplies," Morphed said softly from the doorway. "The physician is on their way. Should I have a crib brought in for the child?" "No. They stay together." Cadogan couldn't explain the certainty in his gut, but he knew Taliesin would panic if they woke and Brennan wasn't within reach. "Post guards at the door. No one enters except the physician and you. And Morphed." He turned to meet her gaze. "Thank you for not questioning this." The elder Omega smiled, and it was full of warmth and knowing. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to come to your senses, my king. Some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard we try to deny them." She left him alone with his sleeping family, and Cadogan pulled a chair close to the bed, settling in to watch over them. The physician arrived within minutes, a capable beta named Karis who examined both Taliesin and Brennan with gentle efficiency. "The Omega is severely malnourished and dehydrated," Karis reported quietly, mindful of not waking them. "Multiple partially healed wounds consistent with defensive injuries from fighting. Some bruising on the ribs, possibly cracked but not broken. They need rest, proper nutrition, and time to heal." She moved to examine Brennan next, her touch featherlight. "The child is healthier," suggesting the Omega sacrificed their own needs to ensure his well-being. "He's underweight but not dangerously so. No serious injuries." Each word was a knife in Cadogan's chest. Taliesin had been starving themselves to feed their child, fighting off attackers while protecting Brennan, walking for gods knew how long to reach the one person who'd abandoned them. "What do they need?" His voice came out rough. "Time, rest, and safety. I'll send regular nutritious meals. Small portions at first so their system adjusts. Light exercise once they've recovered some strength. And..." Karis hesitated. "They'll need emotional support as well. The trauma of whatever they've endured won't heal as quickly as their physical wounds." After the physician left, Cadogan sat in the growing darkness, watching the steady rise and fall of Taliesin's breathing, the way Brennan's small hand clutched at their shirt even in sleep. The coronation had been scheduled to end with a grand feast, followed by 7 days of celebration. Instead, the palace buzzed with gossip and political maneuvering while he sat here guarding his mate. A soft knock interrupted his vigil. Owain entered at his gesture, carrying a tray of food. "Figured you wouldn't leave them to eat in the hall. The council is not pleased. Rhiannon's family has already sent 3 messengers demanding an audience." The border alphas want to know if the alliance stands. And there are rumors spreading about rogues hunting the child. Let them rumor. Convene the High Council at dawn as planned. I want verification of Brennan's bloodline done publicly, with witnesses from every territory. And Owain. Cadogan looked up at his oldest friend. I need you to investigate the rogue attacks Taliesin reported. If someone is hunting my son, I want to know who and why. Already on it. I've sent scouts to track their route backward, see what we can find. Owain set the tray down and studied his king with concerned eyes. This is going to get complicated, my friend. Rhiannon won't go quietly, and her family has the power to make life very difficult. I know. But I won't abandon them again. Whatever the cost. Owain nodded slowly, respect and worry warring in his expression. Then we'll deal with whatever comes. You're not alone in this. After his beta left, Cadogan finally allowed himself to eat, though he kept his attention fixed on the bed. Somewhere around midnight, Brennan stirred and whimpered, and before Cadogan could move, Taliesin was awake, their hands moving soothingly over the child's back, calming him with practiced ease. The Omega's eyes met his across the darkened room, and Cadogan saw the question there. Was this real, or would he disappear again when morning came? I'm not leaving, he said aloud, needing them to hear it. I'll be right here when you wake up. I promise. Taliesin studied him for a long moment, then their hands moved in the darkness. Even with limited light, Cadogan could read the signs. Why now? Why not before? It was a fair question, and one he'd been asking himself since the moment they appeared in that throne room. Because I was a fool who thought duty mattered more than love. Because I believed the council's lies that an Omega couldn't survive court politics. Because I was afraid of what choosing you would cost me. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm still afraid. The political fallout from this will be severe. But I'm more afraid of losing you again, of becoming the kind of king who sacrifices his own family for power. Taliesin's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and their hands moved again. I never asked for this. Only wanted you. Only wanted our son to know his father. I know. And you'll have that. Whatever else happens, Brennan will know his father. You'll have the protection and honor you deserve. I'll make this right, Taliesin. I swear it. The Omega held his gaze for another moment, then nodded slightly and laid back down, gathering Brennan close. But this time they didn't turn away from Cadogan. They kept watching him until sleep claimed them again, as if they needed to verify he was really there. Cadogan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Taliesin walking through that throne room, exhausted and terrified but determined. He saw Brennan reaching for him with small hands. He saw 3 years of missed moments and abandoned promises. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The palace bells rang for morning prayers, and servants began their daily routines. Cadogan heard movement in the halls, voices raised in preparation for what would undoubtedly be the most controversial High Council meeting in generations. Taliesin woke as the first sunlight streamed through the windows, and this time their eyes cleared immediately, finding him still sitting in the same chair. Something in their expression softened, a tentative hope replacing the wary desperation. Morning, Cadogan said softly. Morfydd will bring breakfast soon. The council meets in 2 hours. I'll need to present Brennan before them, prove his heritage. Will you come with me? Taliesin's hands moved quickly. Need to be there. Won't let them hurt him. No one will hurt him. They'll have to go through me first. The protective growl in his voice made Brennan stir, and both adults froze, waiting to see if the child would wake. Instead, Brennan rolled over, snuggling deeper into the blankets with a contented sigh. In sleep, he looked so much like Cadogan that it was almost painful. Same dark hair, same stubborn set to his jaw even in repose, same elegant hands that would one day hold a crown. A knock at the door announced Morfydd's arrival with a cart laden with food. She'd prepared exactly the kind of simple, nutritious meal the physician ordered, porridge with honey, fresh bread, fruit, and herbal tea. She moved efficiently, setting up the meal while signing to Taliesin with practiced fluidity. "She says there are clothes prepared for you in the bathing chamber," Cadogan translated, though Taliesin clearly understood. "And if you need anything, I'll be just outside the door while you eat and prepare." Taliesin's hands moved in response, but this time they signed directly to Morphid, and the elder Omega smiled warmly, nodding and signing back. Whatever they said made some of the tension ease from Taliesin's shoulders. "I'll give you privacy," Cadogan said, standing reluctantly. "But I'll be right outside." "The council meeting," Taliesin interrupted with sharp hand movements. "Stay, please." So he stayed, turning his back to give them privacy while they ate, but remaining in the room as requested. He heard the soft sounds of Brennan waking, the child's sleepy murmurs that weren't quite words but full of meaning. He heard Taliesin's gentle humming. They couldn't speak, but they could hum, and the sound was achingly familiar. When he finally turned back around, Taliesin had managed to coax Brennan into eating some porridge, though the boy seemed more interested in examining his new surroundings with wide golden eyes. Those eyes landed on Cadogan and stayed there, curious and cautious in equal measure. "Hello, Brennan," Cadogan said softly, crouching to be at the child's level. I'm your father." The boy tilted his head, processing this information with a seriousness that seemed far too mature for his age. Then he looked at Taliesin, who signed something Cadogan couldn't see from his angle. Whatever they said made Brennan nod slowly and turn back to study Cadogan with renewed interest. "Duh." The word emerged hesitantly, and Cadogan felt something break open in his chest. "Yes, duh." He extended his hand slowly, letting Brennan decide whether to accept the contact. The boy reached out, his small fingers wrapping around Cadogan's, and smiled. It was the most beautiful thing Cadogan had ever seen. They spent the next hour in relative peace, giving Taliesin time to bathe and dress in the clothes Morphid provided, simple but fine-quality garments that fit reasonably well. Brennan clung to his Omega parent at first, but gradually grew bold enough to venture closer to Cadogan, examining him with the fearless curiosity of a child who'd been told this person was safe. Too soon, Owain arrived to escort them to the council chamber. The walk through the palace corridors drew stares from every servant and courtier they passed. News had spread overnight, and everyone wanted a glimpse of the mysterious Omega and the child who'd disrupted the coronation. Taliesin kept their head high despite the attention, carrying Brennan with practiced ease. Cadogan walked beside them, close enough that his protection was obvious, far enough that he wasn't looming. Every predatory instinct in him screamed to keep his mate and child away from the political vipers waiting in that council chamber, but there was no avoiding this confrontation. The high council chamber was already filled when they arrived. Branwen sat at the head of the ancient stone table, her expression serene despite the tension crackling through the air. Representatives from every major territory occupied the seats, alphas in their formal robes, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Rhiannon sat with her family's delegation, her face carefully blank but her scent betraying her rage. Silence fell as Cadogan entered with Taliesin and Brennan. Every eye in the room focused on the child, reading the heritage written in his features, scenting the undeniable bloodline. "The High Council is convened," Branwen announced formally. "We gather to address the matter of succession, heritage, and the claims made regarding the child Brennan, born of the Omega Taliesin." An alpha from the northern territories, Cadogan, spoke first, his voice gruff but not unkind. "My king, we require verification of the child's parentage. The implications for succession are too significant to proceed on appearance alone." "Agreed," Cadogan said calmly. "High Priestess, what verification do you require?" Branwen stood, her ceremonial robes rustling. "The ancient bloodline ceremony. It will confirm beyond doubt whether the child carries the mark of Gwyneth. Are you willing to submit to this test?" "I am." "And the Omega?" Branwen turned to Taliesin. "Do you consent to this verification?" Taliesin nodded, their arms tightening slightly around Brennan but their expression determined. They would do whatever was necessary to prove their son's heritage. The ceremony itself was simple but sacred. Branwen produced a crystal bowl filled with blessed water, then pricked Cadogan's finger, letting 3 drops of his blood fall into the water. The liquid glowed with golden light, the mark responding to royal blood. Then she approached Taliesin, speaking in the old tongue, asking permission before taking Brennan's small hand. The boy whimpered but didn't cry as she pricked his finger, letting his blood join his father's in the bowl. The golden light exploded, filling the chamber with radiance so bright several alphas shielded their eyes. When it faded, the water had turned pure gold, and symbols had appeared on the surface, ancient runes that spelled out the lineage. The child Brennan is confirmed as the firstborn son of King Cadogan, carrying the direct bloodline of Gwyneth, Branwen announced, her voice ringing with authority. He is legitimate heir to the throne by every law, old and new. The chamber erupted with voices, but Rhiannon's cut through them all. The child's heritage is proven, yes. But what of his bearer? An Omega with no family, no territory, no voice to speak for themselves or their son. The council has always maintained that the royal mate must be of sufficient standing to support the crown. This Omega has nothing. It was a calculated attack, hitting at the heart of the council's long-standing prejudices. Taliesin flinched, and Cadogan felt fury surge through him so powerfully his wolf nearly broke free. "Careful, Rhiannon," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You're speaking about my true mate and the bearer of my child." "I'm speaking about political reality," she shot back, standing to face him across the chamber. "You want to be king? Then act like one. Make the smart choice, not the emotional one. Take the child, acknowledge him as your heir, but put the Omega aside. Marry someone with the power and connections to actually help you rule. Your heart chose poorly, but your crown can still choose wisely." Several alphas murmured agreement, and Cadogan saw the political calculation in their eyes. They'd accept Brennan because his bloodline was undeniable, but they still viewed Taliesin as unsuitable, as less than. Taliesin's hands moved rapidly, signing with sharp, angry gestures. Cadogan translated aloud. "Taliesin says they don't want your crown or your council's approval. They only came here to ensure Brennan's safety and heritage were recognized. They ask for nothing for themselves." "Then you should be pleased to withdraw gracefully," Rhiannon said smoothly, sensing an advantage. "Take the king's protection and provision, raise the child in comfort away from court, and let those of us capable of handling political complexities do what we were born to do." Cadogan had heard enough. He moved to stand directly in front of the council table, his presence commanding absolute attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of his authority and the barely leashed fury of his wolf. "Let me be absolutely clear, since there seems to be confusion about where I stand. Taliesin is my true mate, chosen by the gods themselves. That bond supersedes every political consideration, every council preference, every tradition you want to hide behind to justify your prejudice." He let his gaze sweep across every face in the chamber. "I will not set aside my mate. I will not marry Rhiannon or any other alpha you deem suitable. I will not compromise on this." "You would risk war," Cadogan challenged. "Rhiannon's family controls the Eastern Territories. Without that alliance." "Then we'll build new alliances," Cadogan interrupted. "Or we'll fight. But I will not betray my mate a second time. Not for a crown, not for peace, not for anything." Branwen's voice cut through the rising protests. "Perhaps we're asking the wrong questions. The king has made his choice clear. The child's heritage is confirmed. The real question is whether this council will accept the reality before them or fracture the realm over pride and outdated prejudices." An alpha from the Western Territories, Neres, spoke up. She was known for her pragmatism and had always been one of Cadogan's quieter supporters. The Omega survived attacks from rogues while protecting the heir. They traveled for days, weeks perhaps, through dangerous territory to ensure the child reached safety. They demand nothing for themselves. These are not the actions of someone seeking power or manipulation. These are the actions of a parent protecting their child. A parent who should have presented themselves years ago, another Alpha argued. Why wait until the coronation? Why the dramatic entrance? Taliesin's hands moved rapidly, and Cadogan translated. Because they didn't know about the coronation until 2 weeks ago. They've been in hiding, moving constantly to stay ahead of the rogues hunting them. They tried to contact me multiple times over the past 3 years through written messages sent to the capital, but received no response. He paused, his jaw tightening. Because I made sure all messages from them were intercepted and destroyed. I was too much of a coward to face what I'd abandoned. The admission sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several council members exchanged glances, their expressions shifting as they realized the full scope of what had happened. You actively prevented your mate from contacting you? Nerys asked, her voice heavy with disapproval. While they were pregnant and then caring for your child alone? Yes. Cadogan forced himself to own every shameful decision. I told myself I was protecting them from court politics, that they'd be safer if I stayed away. I was wrong. And when I heard rumors months ago of a silent Omega and child in the borderlands, I dismissed them rather than investigate. I failed in every possible way. Rhiannon laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. So we're supposed to accept this. A king who admits to abandoning his responsibilities, who confesses to intercepting messages, who ignored his own child for years. And now he expects us to embrace this Omega because he's suddenly developed a conscience. No, Cadogan said quietly. I expect you to accept it because it's the truth, and because that child is the legitimate heir whether you like it or not. Everything else is negotiable. The mate bond, the political fallout, the alliances, we can work through all of it. But Brennan's right to the throne is not up for debate. Branwen stood, her ancient eyes moving from face to face around the table. The law is clear. A true mate bond recognized by the gods carries the highest authority in matters of succession and royal marriages. The High Priestess's role is to confirm such bonds. She moved toward Taliesin and Cadogan, gesturing for them to stand together. Taliesin hesitated, but Cadogan offered his hand, and after a moment they took it. The connection sparked between them immediately, that undeniable pull of mate bonds that every wolf in the room could sense. This is a true mate bond, Branwen declared. I can feel the gods' blessing on it as clearly as I feel the sun's warmth. The Omega Taliesin is King Cadogan's chosen mate by divine right. Any attempt to separate them or install another as the king's consort would be blasphemy. Using religious authority was brilliant. Even Rhiannon's family, for all their political power, wouldn't openly challenge the High Priestess on matters of divine law. Several alphas who'd been hostile moments before shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to be seen as going against the gods' will. But Rhiannon wasn't done fighting. Fine. Accept the mate bond, accept the child. But the Omega still lacks the training, the education, the basic knowledge required to function as a royal consort. They can't even speak. How will they represent the crown at diplomatic functions? How will they handle the complexities of court politics? They'll learn, Cadogan said firmly. With support and time. And in the meantime, Rhiannon pressed. While they're learning, who handles the responsibilities of the royal consort? Who manages the delicate alliances and negotiations that keep this realm from tearing itself apart? She was trying to position herself as an essential advisor, someone Cadogan would have to rely on even if he wouldn't marry her. It was a smart political maneuver, and several council members nodded thoughtfully. Taliesin's hands moved suddenly, sharp and decisive. Their eyes blazed with an intensity that made several alphas lean back. Cadogan translated, fighting to keep his expression neutral. Taliesin says that being unable to speak doesn't mean being unable to think or lead. They managed to survive for 3 years, protecting a child while being hunted by rogues. They navigated through territories controlled by alphas who would have killed them for sport if given the chance. They maintained the intelligence networks in the borderlands that sent regular reports to the capital. Reports signed with my seal that apparently no one questioned. The chamber went silent. Cadogan hadn't known about the reports, but he wasn't surprised. Taliesin had always been brilliant, resourceful in ways that had nothing to do with physical power. The borderland intelligence reports, Cadogan said slowly. Those detailed analyses of rogue movements and territory disputes that have been keeping us ahead of conflicts for the past 2 years. Those came from a silent Omega traveling with a child. Taliesin nodded once, their chin lifting with quiet pride. Nerys laughed, the sound genuine and appreciative. Well, that certainly changes things, doesn't it? We've been relying on this Omega's intelligence without even knowing it. And you want to argue they're unfit for court politics. Rhiannon's face flushed with anger, but she'd lost her footing. The revelation had shifted the dynamic entirely. Even alphas who'd been skeptical now looked at Taliesin with new respect. There's still the matter of the rogue attacks. Owain spoke up from his position near the door. If someone is actively hunting the heir, we need to address that threat immediately. Agreed, Cadogan said. Taliesin, can you identify who's behind the attacks? Any symbols, scents, patterns that might help us track them? The Omega's hands moved rapidly, and Cadogan translated. Multiple attacks over the past 6 months, increasing in frequency and coordination. The rogues aren't acting randomly. They have a target, a purpose. They spoke of a bounty, someone powerful offering rewards for the child. One of them had a mark burned into their skin, a wolf's head split by a sword. The chamber erupted. That symbol was known to every wolf present. It belonged to the Separatists, a radical faction that had been quiet for years but never truly disbanded. They believed in the old ways, when only pure alpha bloodlines ruled and Omegas had no rights at all. The Separatists want the child dead because his bearer is an Omega, Branwen said grimly. They see him as an abomination, a threat to their ideology. If they learn he's been confirmed as heir, the attacks will intensify. Then we fortify security and hunt down every separatist cell in the realm, Cadogan said flatly. No mercy. They threaten my son. They die. That could push them into open rebellion, Cadogan warned. They have sympathizers in several territories, including some in positions of power. Then they'll reveal themselves, and we'll deal with them accordingly. Cadogan's voice was ice and iron. I'm done compromising with wolves who think some of us are worth less than others. The Separatists want to live in the past. They can die there. Brennan had fallen asleep against Taliesin's shoulder during the long council session, oblivious to the political storm raging around him. Looking at his peaceful face, Cadogan felt his resolve harden into something unbreakable. This child would grow up in a realm where his Omega parent was respected, where mate bonds mattered more than political convenience, where being unable to speak didn't mean being unable to lead. Even if he had to tear down the old system and build a new one from scratch. I propose a motion, Nerys said, standing formally. We accept King Cadogan's mate bond with the Omega Taliesin as legitimate and binding. We acknowledge Brennan as the confirmed heir. And we task the king with rooting out the separatist threat while working to educate his mate in the necessary protocols of court. We give them 1 year to prove this arrangement can work. It was a compromise, one that gave the council face while still supporting Cadogan's position. Smart politics from a smart alpha. I second the motion, Cadogan said after a moment's consideration. One by one, the other alphas voiced their support. Some enthusiastically, others grudgingly, but the motion carried. Only Rhiannon and 2 alphas from her family's faction abstained, their silence more telling than any argument. Branwen struck her staff against the stone floor 3 times, the sound echoing through the chamber. So it is decided. King Cadogan's bond with Taliesin is recognized. Brennan is confirmed as heir. The separatist threat will be addressed with all available resources. This council is adjourned. As the alphas filed out, several approached to offer cautious congratulations or assurances of support. Nerys paused beside Taliesin, signing slowly and carefully, Welcome to court. It's brutal here, but I think you'll manage just fine. Taliesin signed back. Thank you. I'll try not to embarrass the king too badly. Nerys laughed and translated for those who couldn't understand signs. The moment of levity helped ease some of the residual tension. Only Rhiannon remained seated after everyone else had left, her expression carved from stone. When she finally stood, her movements were sharp with barely contained rage. This isn't over, she said quietly, speaking only to Cadogan. You've made powerful enemies today. My family won't forget this humiliation. And when your Omega proves incapable of handling the pressures of court, when the political alliances crumble, when the separatists use this situation to recruit more followers, don't say I didn't warn you. Noted, Cadogan replied evenly. But Rhiannon, if you or your family make any move against Taliesin or my son, I won't respond as your former ally. I'll respond as a king protecting his family from traitors. Choose your next steps carefully. She held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and swept from the chamber, her silver dress flowing behind her like mercury. Taliesin's hand found his, squeezing gently. When he looked down, they were signing with their free hand. You made dangerous enemies for us. I made dangerous enemies for myself, he corrected. You and Brennan are innocent in all this. Any consequences fall on me. We're family now. Consequences fall on all of us. The simple truth of it hit him hard. He'd spent 3 years avoiding responsibility for his mate and child, and now he'd pulled them into a political maelstrom that could turn violent at any moment. The separatists would see Brennan as a target. Rhiannon's family would look for any opportunity to undermine Taliesin's position, and he'd have to navigate it all while trying to earn back the trust he'd shattered. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said fiercely. Either of you. Whatever it takes. Taliesin studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. They didn't fully trust him yet. How could they, after what he'd done? But they were willing to try. For Brennan's sake, if nothing else. The walk back to the royal wing was quieter than the journey to the council chamber. Word had already spread about the vote, and servants bowed respectfully as they passed, acknowledging Taliesin as the king's recognized mate. Some of the bows were genuine, others performed out of duty, but the message was clear. The Omega's position was official now. Back in their quarters, Taliesin laid the still sleeping Brennan in the bed and then collapsed into a chair, exhaustion written in every line of their body. The morning's events had clearly drained them, coming as they did on top of weeks of running and fighting and barely surviving. Rest, Cadogan urged. I'll have Morfydd bring lunch and... Taliesin's hands moved sharply. Stay. Talk to me. Real talk, not political maneuvering. So Cadogan pulled a chair close and sat, and for the first time in 3 years they really talked. Or rather, Taliesin signed and Cadogan spoke, the conversation flowing between them like it used to in those stolen nights at the border. Why did you really leave? Taliesin asked first, cutting straight to the heart of it. The truth. Fear, Cadogan admitted. The council told me that a king couldn't have an Omega mate, that you'd be torn apart by court politics. They said I had to choose between my duty to the realm and my personal happiness, and I convinced myself that duty had to come first. He looked down at his hands. But the truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of fighting the council, terrified of being the kind of king who put personal desire above political necessity, terrified that if I chose you, I'd lose everything else. And now I'm still terrified. But I'm more terrified of losing you and Brennan again. More terrified of becoming the kind of person who abandons his family for a crown. The throne isn't worth anything if I have to give up my soul to keep it. Taliesin's hands moved slowly, carefully forming each sign. I never wanted your throne. Just wanted you. Wanted our child to know his father, to grow up safe and loved. When you left, I thought I'd done something wrong, that I wasn't enough. The words shattered him. Gods, Taliesin, no. You were always more than enough. The failing was entirely mine. I was weak and selfish and cowardly. You deserved so much better. Maybe, Taliesin signed with a slight smile. But I got you instead. So now what? We figure out how to make this work. If you'll let me try. I know I don't deserve another chance, but... Taliesin reached out and pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. Then their hands moved. Stop apologizing and start doing. Show me you've changed. Show Brennan he has a father worth knowing. Words are cheap. Actions matter. It was fair. More than fair. And Cadogan nodded, accepting the challenge. They spent the rest of the day in relative peace. Brennan woke from his nap and gradually warmed to Cadogan, especially when he discovered the king was willing to get down on the floor and play. The boy had a laugh like bells, pure and joyful, and every time Cadogan heard it, something in his chest tightened with love and regret for all the moments he'd missed. Morfydd brought food and supplies, along with news from the palace. The vote had been well received by most of the court, though Rhiannon's faction was already spreading rumors and attempting to undermine Taliesin's position. Several alphas had sent formal gifts acknowledging Brennan as heir. And the first reports were coming in from Owain's investigation into the separatists. The scouts found evidence of at least 3 attacks along the route from the borderlands, Owain reported during a brief visit. 2 dead rogues with a separatist mark, killed in what looks like defensive fighting. Several more witnesses who reported seeing a hooded Omega traveling with a child, moving fast and staying off main roads. They covered almost 200 miles in just under 3 weeks. 200 miles. With a toddler. While fighting off multiple attacks. Cadogan looked at Taliesin with fresh awe and horror. How had they survived? There's more, Owain continued grimly. We found evidence of a substantial bounty. Enough gold to set up a rogue pack for years. Someone powerful is bankrolling these attacks. The separatists are involved, but they're not working alone. Who? Cadogan demanded. Still investigating. But whoever it is has resources and influence. They knew about Brennan's existence, knew roughly where Taliesin was hiding, and coordinated multiple rogue packs to hunt them. This was organized, well-funded, and came from someone with access to information they shouldn't have had. A traitor in the capital. Someone close enough to the crown to access sensitive intelligence. The implications made Cadogan's blood run cold. Find them, he said quietly. Whatever it takes. And Owain. Increase security around these quarters. Triple the guards. No one gets close to my family without going through wolves we absolutely trust. After Owain left, Cadogan found Taliesin standing at the window, watching the sun set over the capital. Brennan played on the floor nearby, building towers with wooden blocks and knocking them down with gleeful laughter. You're thinking about running again, Cadogan said softly, reading the tension in their shoulders. Taliesin signed without turning. Thinking about how many people want my son dead. How staying here might make him a bigger target. Running didn't keep you safe before. At least here you have resources, protection, allies. We can find whoever's funding the attacks and eliminate the threat at its source. And if they're already inside these walls. If the traitor Owain mentioned is someone you trust. It was a valid fear, and one Cadogan shared. Then we'll find them and deal with them. But Taliesin, running with Brennan through the territories while someone with unlimited resources hunts you isn't sustainable. Eventually you'll get tired or unlucky and... He couldn't finish the sentence. Taliesin turned to face him, their expression troubled. I know. That's why I came here. But I'm putting him in danger by staying too. Let me protect you both. Please. I failed you before, but I won't fail again. You can't promise that. No one can. No, Cadogan agreed. But I can promise I'll die before I let anyone hurt either of you. I can promise I'll use every resource of the crown to hunt down these threats. I can promise you won't face this alone. Taliesin studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It wasn't complete trust. That would take time to rebuild. But it was acceptance. They would stay at least for now. That night, Cadogan insisted on sleeping on the couch in the sitting room rather than returning to his own chambers. He told himself it was about security, about being close in case of threats, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't bear to be apart from them again. Around midnight, he woke to find Taliesin standing over him, illuminated by moonlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Taliesin's hands formed a single sign. Nightmare. Just woke up. You. Can't sleep. Too quiet here. Too safe. Keeps waiting for the next attack. Cadogan sat up slowly, making room on the couch. After a moment's hesitation, Taliesin sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance but close enough that he could feel their warmth. Tell me about him, Cadogan said softly. About Brennan. What was he like as a baby? What did I miss? So Taliesin told him, signing in the darkness while Cadogan translated the stories into words in his own mind. Brennan had been born during a winter storm, coming early and fierce, almost too strong for Taliesin to survive alone. He'd grown quickly, hitting milestones early, showing the enhanced development common to alpha bloodlines. His first word hadn't been a word at all but a howl, startling them both when it emerged from his tiny body at 8 months old. He loved music, Taliesin signed. Any kind of music. Would stop crying instantly if you hummed to him. Still does. He gets that from you, Cadogan said, remembering Taliesin's humming. Maybe. Or maybe he just knows music is how we communicate when signs aren't enough. They talked through the night, sharing stories and memories, carefully rebuilding the connection that had been severed 3 years ago. Cadogan told Taliesin about the political maneuvering he'd endured, the constant pressure to marry Rhiannon, the way he'd buried himself in work to avoid thinking about what he'd lost. Taliesin shared the terror of discovering they were pregnant, the determination to protect their child no matter what, the isolated life they'd built in the borderlands. As dawn approached, Taliesin's signs grew slower, fatigue finally catching up with them. They leaned against Cadogan's shoulder, and he froze, afraid to move and break the moment. Sleep, he murmured. I'll watch over you both. For once, Taliesin didn't argue. They simply let themselves drift off, trusting him enough to be vulnerable, and Cadogan felt the weight of that trust like a sacred responsibility. The next days fell into a careful rhythm. Cadogan balanced his royal duties with time spent with Taliesin and Brennan, determined to prove through actions that he meant his promises. He introduced them to key allies in the court, including Nerys, who took an immediate liking to Taliesin and volunteered to help with court protocol training. Morfydd worked with Taliesin daily, helping them navigate the complexities of palace life while respecting their limitations and strengths. To everyone's surprise, Taliesin proved remarkably adept at court politics. Their inability to speak forced others to pay closer attention, to watch and listen rather than dominate conversations. And their intelligence reports had already earned them respect among the military and security advisors. Brennan flourished in the safety of the palace, his personality emerging now that he wasn't constantly on the move. He was curious, fearless, and surprisingly perceptive for his age. He learned to sign along with his spoken words, communicating fluidly with Taliesin while also developing his own voice. But the threats didn't disappear. Reports continued to come in of separatist activity, now openly recruiting under the banner of opposing the Omega Heir. 3 more attempts were made to breach palace security, all thwarted but all disturbingly well informed about guard rotations and protocols. The traitor was still out there, still feeding information to their enemies. 2 weeks after the coronation council, Owain finally got a break in the investigation. He came to Cadogan's private office, his expression grim. We found the source of the intelligence leak, he said without preamble. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Geraint. You're head of household security for the past 5 years. He's been passing information to the separatists since before Brennan was born. We found records of payments, coded messages, everything. Cadogan felt the betrayal like a physical blow. Geraint had been trusted, valued, considered a friend. How long have you known? Confirmed it this morning. He doesn't know we're on to him yet. We can use that. No. Cadogan's voice was ice. Arrest him now. Publicly. I want every wolf in this realm to understand what happens to traitors who threaten my family. The arrest happened at noon in the main courtyard, with half the court as witnesses. Geraint fought, protesting his innocence even as the evidence was presented. But when they brought out the written communications bearing his signature, when they displayed the gold he'd been paid, his defiance crumbled into rage. You should have married the proper Alpha, he spat at Cadogan. You should have put the realm first instead of your perverted bond with that speechless Omega. Everything that's happened is your fault. The slur against Taliesin ignited Cadogan's fury, but before he could respond, Taliesin themselves stepped forward from where they'd been watching. They moved with quiet dignity until they stood directly in front of Geraint, and their hands moved in signs everyone present could see. My child is the future of this realm. Your hatred is the past. Which do you think will survive? Morford translated for those who couldn't understand, and the simple truth of it silenced even Geraint's protests. Trial was swift. Geraint was found guilty of treason and providing intelligence to enemies of the crown. His sentence was death, carried out within days. Cadogan didn't attend the execution, but he felt no guilt about ordering it. Anyone who threatened his family would face the same fate. But Geraint's arrest didn't end the separatist threat. If anything, it seemed to energize them. Within days, 3 more attacks occurred in different territories, all targeting Omega families, all bearing the separatist mark. They were making a statement. This wasn't just about Brennan anymore. This was about their entire ideology. They're trying to start a civil war, Neri said during an emergency council meeting. Force everyone to choose sides. If we respond too harshly, we look like tyrants. If we don't respond strongly enough, we look weak. Then we respond strategically, Cadogan said. We protect Omega families in every territory. We offer rewards for information leading to separatist cells. We make it clear that this realm has no place for their hatred. That will be expensive, Cadogan warned. And it will take resources away from other priorities. I don't care. This is the priority now. The campaign against the separatists became all-consuming. Cadogan spent long hours strategizing with his military advisors, coordinating with allied alphas, personally overseeing security protocols. He pushed himself to the point of exhaustion, driven by the fear that any moment of inattention might give his enemies an opening. Taliesin noticed, of course. They started appearing in his office late at night, bringing food he'd forgotten to eat, sitting quietly while he worked, just their presence a reminder of why he was fighting so hard. One night, 3 weeks into the campaign, Taliesin finally interrupted his work, signing firmly. You're going to collapse if you keep this pace. I'm fine. You're not. And Brennan asked today why his father doesn't play with him anymore. That stopped Cadogan cold. He'd been so focused on protecting his son that he'd forgotten to actually be a father to him. I'm sorry. I know. You're trying to save the world. But he's 2 years old. He doesn't understand strategy and campaigns. He just knows his father is always gone. Taliesin's hands moved gently now, not accusing but honest. He needs you present, not just protected. It was a fair point, one Cadogan had no defense against. He'd been repeating his same pattern, choosing duty over family, convincing himself it was for their own good. You're right, he admitted. I'll do better. And he tried. He carved out time each day to be fully present with Brennan, playing games, telling stories, teaching him about their family's history. He included Taliesin in more political discussions, valuing their insights and observations. He worked to build not just a protected family but an actual relationship with them both. Slowly, gradually, the crisis began to ease. The coordinated attacks continued, but less frequently. Several major separatist cells were dismantled. And public opinion began to shift as people saw the king's determination to protect all Omegas, not just his own mate. 2 months after the disrupted coronation, Branwen approached Cadogan with a proposal. "It's time to finish what we started," she said. "The realm needs stability, and that means completing your coronation, with Taliesin at your side as recognized consort. Will the council support it?" "Most will. Rhiannon's faction will oppose it, but they're in the minority now. Taliesin has proven themselves capable and intelligent. Brennan is accepted as heir. It's time to make it all official." The second coronation was nothing like the first. This time, there were no political machinations, no forced smiles, no alliances built on convenience. When Cadogan stood before the assembled wolves with Taliesin beside him and Brennan held between them, it felt right in a way the first ceremony never had. Branwen blessed them with the ancient words, and this time, when she placed the crown on Cadogan's head, she also placed a smaller circlet on Taliesin's, the traditional symbol of the royal consort. The Omega's hands trembled as they accepted it, their eyes meeting Cadogan's with something that looked like hope. "Do you, Cadogan of Gwynedd, accept the responsibilities of kingship?" Branwen intoned. "I do. Do you, Taliesin, accept the responsibilities of royal consort, to stand beside your king in all things?" Taliesin signed their response, and Morfydd translated. "I do. Then by the power granted to me by the gods and the old laws, I pronounce you king and consort of the realm. May your rule be just, your bond be strong, and your family be blessed." The throne room erupted in applause, genuine this time, born of respect rather than political obligation. Even some wolves who'd been skeptical had been won over by Taliesin's quiet competence and Cadogan's obvious devotion to his family. Only Rhiannon and her closest allies remained stone-faced, and Cadogan knew he hadn't heard the last from them. But for now, in this moment, he allowed himself to feel victorious. That night there was a feast, smaller and more intimate than the grand celebration originally planned, but more meaningful for it. Cadogan sat at the high table with Taliesin beside him and Brennan on his lap, watching his son's delighted reactions to the music and dancing. "Happy?" he asked Taliesin quietly. Their hands moved in his peripheral vision. "Getting there. Ask me again when the separatists are gone and we've survived a full season without assassination attempts." He laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuine joy. "Fair enough. But yes," Taliesin added, their signs gentler now. "Happier than I thought I'd be. You're actually trying. That matters." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not ever completely, but it was acknowledgement. It was progress. And Cadogan would take it. The separatist threat didn't disappear overnight, but over the following months, it diminished steadily. Cadogan's policies protecting Omegas across all territories began to shift cultural attitudes. Slowly, painfully slowly, the realm began to change. Taliesin grew into their role as royal consort with unexpected grace. Their intelligence reports became legendary, their insights sought by military advisors and diplomats alike. They developed a system of court signs that allowed for more nuanced political communication, revolutionizing how nonverbal wolves participated in governance. And Brennan, he thrived. He grew strong and clever, learning both sign language and spoken words, able to communicate with every wolf in the palace regardless of their abilities. He had his father's confidence and his Omega parents' intelligence, and everyone who met him agreed he would make an extraordinary king one day. A year after the disrupted coronation, Cadogan stood in the same throne room where everything had changed, watching Taliesin teach Brennan the traditional signs of respect used in formal ceremonies. The boy mimicked his parents' movements with serious concentration, determined to get it perfect. "He's growing up so fast," Owain observed from beside him. "Hard to believe it's been a year since they appeared in that doorway. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Cadogan smiled, watching Brennan successfully complete the sequence and looked to Taliesin for approval. The Omega's face lit up with pride, and they pulled their son into a hug. "You made the right choice," Owain said quietly. I know it wasn't easy and there have been costs. But you made the right choice. Thanks, Cadogan replied. Though I'm not sure it was really a choice. More like finally doing what I should have done 3 years ago. Still counts. Later that night, after Brennan had been put to bed and the palace had settled into quiet, Cadogan found Taliesin on the private balcony outside their quarters. They'd moved into shared rooms 6 months ago, a gradual progression from separate spaces to tentative cohabitation to genuine partnership. Couldn't sleep, he asked, joining them at the railing. Taliesin shook their head, then signed. Just thinking about how different everything is now. Better different or worse different? Better. Mostly. They paused, then signed again. I never wanted to be royal consort. Never wanted court politics and diplomatic functions and all this responsibility. I know. I'm sorry for pulling you into it. Don't be. Taliesin turned to face him fully. I wanted you. Wanted our son to know his father. Wanted to be a family. The rest of it. I'm learning to handle it. But that core thing. That's what matters. Cadogan reached out slowly, giving them time to pull away. And when they didn't, he pulled them close. They fit together perfectly, like they always had, like the gods had designed them specifically for each other. I love you, he said softly. I don't think I ever actually said it out loud before. But I love you. I love our son. I love the life we're building together, even with all its complications. Taliesin's hands moved between them, signing against his chest. I love you too. Still angry sometimes about the 3 years we lost. Still scared sometimes that you'll choose duty over us again. But I love you. I won't, Cadogan promised. Never again. You and Brennan, you're not separate from my duty anymore. You are my duty. Everything else serves that. They stood together in the moonlight, holding each other while the capital slept below them. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still threats to face, political battles to fight, enemies who would never accept an Omega consort or a half-Omega heir. Rhiannon's faction continued to cause problems, and rumors persisted of separatist cells regrouping in distant territories. But they would face it all together now. As mates, as partners, as a family. The next morning brought a surprise visitor, Nerys, arriving with urgent news and an unexpected proposal. The Western Territories want to formalize an alliance, she announced without preamble, spreading maps across Cadogan's desk. But they have conditions. They want Taliesin to visit personally, to meet with their Omega councils and demonstrate that the Crown truly values Omega perspectives in governance. Cadogan looked at Taliesin, who'd been reviewing intelligence reports in the corner of the office. What do you think? Taliesin's hands moved thoughtfully. It's political theater. They want to see if I'll embarrass you in unfamiliar territory. Test whether I can handle pressure without my support system. Probably, Nerys agreed cheerfully. But it's also a genuine opportunity. The Western Territories have the largest Omega population in the realm. If you can win them over, it will shift power dynamics significantly. Plus, their Omega councils have been advocating for reforms for decades. Your presence would give them legitimacy. It's also dangerous, Cadogan pointed out. Traveling with limited security, going into territory where separatist sympathizers might still operate. I can handle it, Taliesin signed firmly. I've survived worse with less protection. And if we're going to change attitudes about Omegas in positions of power, hiding in the palace won't accomplish that. They had a point, but every protective instinct Cadogan possessed screamed against it. The thought of Taliesin traveling without him, potentially walking into danger, made his wolf snarl with anxiety. I'm coming with you, he said finally. No. Taliesin's signs were sharp and definitive. This needs to be me. If you come, it looks like I need protection, like I can't function without the Alpha King hovering. I need to do this alone. Well, with appropriate security, but without you. Taliesin. Trust me. Their eyes held his steadily. You've been asking me to trust you for months. Now I'm asking you to trust me. It was a fair reversal, and Cadogan knew it. He'd been pushing Taliesin to take risks, to step into their role as consort, to believe in their own capabilities. He couldn't turn around and undermine that by refusing to let them operate independently. "Fine," he said, the word tasting like ash. "But you take Owain and a full security detail. You check in daily. And at the first sign of trouble, you come home immediately." Taliesin's expression softened and they signed. "Agreed." And Cadogan, "Thank you for letting me do this." The preparations took a week. Owain personally selected the security team, wolves he'd trust with his own life, all of them loyal to Cadogan and committed to protecting the royal consort. Morfydd helped Taliesin prepare for the cultural protocols of the Western Territories, and Nerys provided detailed briefings on the key Omega Council members they'd be meeting. Brennan was confused about why his parent was leaving, clinging to Taliesin the night before departure with unusual neediness. The Omega held him close, signing one-handed. "Just a short trip. I'll be back before you know it. Your father will take good care of you. Promise?" Brennan asked, his voice small. "Promise. Have I ever broken a promise to you?" The boy considered this seriously, then shook his head. "No. You always keep promises. Then trust me now." Watching them together, Cadogan felt the weight of his past failures. Taliesin had never broken a promise to their son because they'd never had the luxury of prioritizing anything above Brennan's well-being. Meanwhile, Cadogan had broken the most fundamental promise possible, to be there for his family. He was still working to make up for that. The morning of departure arrived too quickly. Cadogan stood in the courtyard as Taliesin mounted their horse, the security detail forming up around them. His mate looked small surrounded by armed guards, but their spine was straight and their chin lifted with determination. 2 weeks, Cadogan said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Then you come home." 2 weeks, Taliesin agreed, signing from horseback. "Take care of our son. And Cadogan, try not to start any wars while I'm gone." Despite his anxiety, he laughed. "I'll do my best." He watched them ride through the palace gates until they disappeared from view, then forced himself to turn away and return to his duties. Brennan needed him to be strong, to demonstrate that Taliesin's absence wasn't cause for panic. The first few days passed without incident. Taliesin's daily reports were detailed and encouraging. The Omega Councils had received them warmly, negotiations were proceeding smoothly, and no security threats had materialized. Cadogan started to relax slightly, though he still checked the communication crystals obsessively for updates. On the 5th day, the reports stopped coming. At first, Cadogan told himself there were innocent explanations. Communication crystals could malfunction, weather could interfere with magical signals, Taliesin might simply be in meetings that ran long. But by the 6th day with no word, his anxiety transformed into cold terror. "Send scouts," he ordered Owain. "Now. I want to know what happened to them." "Already done," his beta replied grimly. "Should have word back by tomorrow morning at the latest." That night was the longest of Cadogan's life. He paced his chambers, unable to sleep, his wolf howling inside him with distress. Every nightmare he'd ever had about losing Taliesin played out in vivid detail. He'd sent his mate into danger, let them go alone, and now they were missing. Brennan sensed his father's agitation and woke crying, refusing to be comforted. "Want Mama," he sobbed, using the term he'd started calling Taliesin. "Where's Mama?" "They're coming home soon," Cadogan promised, holding his son close and praying desperately that it was true. Just a little longer. The scouts returned at dawn with news that made Cadogan's blood run cold. Taliesin's party had been ambushed 2 days ago while traveling between territories. There had been a fight, evidence of it littered the road, but no bodies had been found. The security detail had disappeared, and Taliesin with them. "Separatists?" Cadogan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Most likely. The attack site had their marks. But it's strange. Usually they kill Omegas on sight as a statement. The fact that they took prisoners suggests something else is going on. Hostages. They'd taken hostages to leverage against him. The tactical part of Cadogan's mind recognized it immediately, but the mate-bonded part of him could only think about what his Omega must be enduring. "Mobilize the full military," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "I want every separatist cell, every sympathizer, every wolf who's ever expressed support for their ideology. I want them found and brought in for questioning. We're done playing nice. My king, that's a massive undertaking. It could be seen as... I don't care how it's seen." Cadogan's power rippled through the room, making every wolf present lower their eyes. "They took my mate. They took the royal consort. This is an act of war, and I will respond accordingly." Within hours, the palace transformed into a military command center. Troops deployed to every territory with orders to root out separatist operations. Intelligence networks activated across the realm. Every resource Cadogan could muster focused on one goal: finding Taliesin and bringing them home. Branwen appeared in his office that afternoon. Her ancient eyes filled with concern. "Be careful, my king. Rage makes for poor strategy. The separatists may be trying to provoke exactly this response." "Then they've succeeded," Cadogan said flatly. "I will burn this entire realm to ashes before I let them harm my mate. And what of your son? He needs you present and calm, not consumed by vengeance." The words penetrated his fury enough to make him pause. Brennan. Gods, Brennan had already lost one parent temporarily. He couldn't afford to lose his father to mindless rage. "You're right," he admitted heavily. "But Branwen, I can't just sit here doing nothing while Taliesin is out there, possibly hurt, definitely terrified." "Who says you'll be doing nothing? Coordinate the search, yes. Use your resources, absolutely. But do it as a king, not as a vengeful mate. There's a difference." It was the hardest thing Cadogan had ever done, but he forced himself to step back from the edge of total war and approach the situation strategically. He worked with his military advisors to identify the most likely separatist strongholds. He authorized targeted raids rather than wholesale territory lockdowns. He kept Brennan close, maintaining as much normalcy as possible for his son's sake even as his world crumbled. 3 agonizing days after the ambush, they got their first real lead. A captured separatist, facing execution for treason, offered information in exchange for clemency. "They're holding the Omega in the old fortress near the northern border," he confessed. "Using them as bait to draw you out. They want the king to come personally, leave the protection of the palace. That's when they'll strike." It was an obvious trap, but Cadogan didn't care. "Tell me everything. Guard rotations, defenses, exactly where they're holding my mate." The separatists talked, providing enough detail that Owain was satisfied the information was legitimate. They began planning a rescue operation immediately. Stealth approach, overwhelming force, extraction within minutes. "You're not coming," Owain said firmly when Cadogan started preparing his weapons. "This is exactly what they want. You'd be playing right into their hands. I'm not sending others to rescue my mate while I hide in the palace. You're not hiding. You're being smart. Your presence makes this exponentially more dangerous for everyone involved, including Taliesin. Let me handle this with the strike team. We'll bring them home." Every instinct screamed at Cadogan to refuse, to go himself, to be the one who saved his mate. But Owain was right. His presence would endanger everyone, including Taliesin. Sometimes leadership meant trusting others to act when you couldn't. "Bring them home," he said finally, gripping his beta's shoulder. "Whatever it takes, bring them home safe." "I will. I promise." The strike team left at nightfall, moving fast and quiet through the territories toward the northern border. Cadogan waited in the palace, pacing and unable to focus on anything except the passage of time. Brennan had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from days of stress and confusion, but Cadogan remained awake, counting down the hours until he'd know whether his mate lived or died. The communication crystal flared to life just before dawn. Owain's voice came through, rough with exhaustion but triumphant. "We have them. Taliesin is injured but alive. Coming home now." Cadogan's legs nearly gave out with relief. "How badly injured?" "Defensive wounds, some bruising, dehydration. Nothing life-threatening, but they're weak." The bastards weren't gentle with their hostage. Rage surged through him again, but Cadogan pushed it down. Time for vengeance later. Right now his mate was coming home, and that was all that mattered. He met them at the gates as the sun rose, unable to wait even a moment longer. The strike team rode in with Taliesin held carefully in Owain's arms, and Cadogan's heart broke at the sight. His Omega's face was bruised, their clothes torn and stained with blood. But their eyes were open and alert, and when they saw him, relief transformed their features. Cadogan took them from Owain with infinite gentleness, cradling them against his chest. "I've got you. You're safe now. I'm so sorry I let this happen." Taliesin's hand came up weakly, pressing against his mouth to stop the words. Then their fingers moved in abbreviated signs. "Not your fault. Couldn't prevent this. Just glad to be home." The physician examined them immediately, confirming Owain's assessment. The injuries were painful but not serious. With rest and care, Taliesin would make a full recovery. But the trauma of the captivity would take longer to heal. When Brennan woke and saw Taliesin back in their quarters, he burst into tears and refused to let go of his parent for hours. Taliesin held him, signing one-handed that they were okay, that everything was all right now, that they'd never leave him again if they could help it. Watching them together, Cadogan made a decision. He'd been trying to balance being king with being a father and mate, constantly pulled between competing priorities. But his family had to come first. Always. If that meant delegating more royal duties, restructuring how the crown operated, even stepping down if necessary, so be it. Over the following weeks, as Taliesin recovered, Cadogan implemented sweeping changes to how the realm operated. He elevated Omega councils to official advisory positions, giving them real power in governance. He restructured the military to root out separatist sympathizers at every level. He created new laws protecting mixed bonds and making discrimination based on designation a criminal offense. And he changed how the crown itself functioned. Instead of one king bearing all responsibilities, he created a formal consort role with genuine authority, not just ceremonial duties but actual decision-making power. Taliesin would be his true partner in ruling, not just his mate. The conservative elements of the court howled in protest, but Cadogan didn't care. He'd learned the hard way what happened when he prioritized their opinions over his family's well-being. "You're remaking the entire system," Nerys observed during one particularly contentious council meeting. "Some alphas are calling it revolution." "Good," Cadogan replied. "Maybe it's time for a revolution. The old ways failed us. Time to build something better." Taliesin recovered slowly, both physically and emotionally. They had nightmares for weeks, waking in terror and needing Cadogan's presence to feel safe again. The confident progress they'd made as royal consorts seemed to evaporate, leaving them uncertain and anxious. But gradually, with support and patience, they found their footing again. 3 months after the kidnapping, Taliesin stood before the full High Council and delivered their first formal report, using sign language that Morfydd translated, refusing to let their inability to speak diminish their voice. They outlined a comprehensive reform program for Omega rights and protections, backed by detailed analysis and specific policy recommendations. It was brilliant, thorough, and exactly what the realm needed. By the time they finished, even the most conservative alphas were nodding thoughtfully. "That," Cadogan said after a long silence, "was the most competent policy briefing I've heard in 20 years. Taliesin's hands moved with visible pride. "Thank you. But credit belongs to the Omega councils across all territories. I'm just presenting their collective wisdom." The reforms passed with strong support. Within a year, the realm looked fundamentally different. Omegas served in positions of power throughout government and military. Mixed bonds were not just accepted but celebrated. The separatists had been reduced to scattered remnants, their ideology increasingly seen as archaic and cruel. It wasn't perfect. Change never came without resistance. There were still territories where old prejudices ran deep, still alphas who muttered about the Omega consort and the half-Omega heir. But the tide had turned, and everyone could feel it. On the second anniversary of the disrupted coronation, Branwen called for a formal celebration. 2 years ago, everything changed when an Omega walked into a throne room carrying a child. Let's mark that moment, honor it, show the realm how far we've come. The celebration was magnificent, not because of expensive decorations or elaborate ceremonies, but because of what it represented. Omega families from every territory attended as honored guests. The throne room that had once been filled with hostile alphas now welcomed wolves of every designation as equals. Cadogan stood at the center of it with Taliesin beside him and Brennan between them, now a confident 4-year-old who could sign and speak with equal fluidity. Looking around the room, seeing the genuine smiles and hearing the authentic laughter, he felt something close to peace. "What are you thinking?" Taliesin signed during a quiet moment. "That I almost lost this. That I almost sacrificed everything that actually matters for a crown that only has value because of who I share it with." Very philosophical. Also, Brennan just stole 3 pastries from the dessert table. Cadogan turned to see his son's suspiciously bulging cheeks and couldn't help but laugh. "He gets that from you. From me. I'm always perfectly well behaved. You literally broke into the palace kitchens last week because you were craving honey cakes at midnight." Taliesin's eyes sparkled with amusement. "That was reconnaissance. I was testing security protocols." "Sure you were." They stood together watching their son charm everyone he met, already showing signs of the leader he'd become. Brennan had inherited the best of both parents. His Alpha father's confidence and his Omega parents' intelligence, combined with an innate sense of justice that would serve him well as future king. "He's going to be extraordinary," Cadogan said softly. "He already is." Taliesin paused, then signed something that made Cadogan's heart stop. "And his sibling will be too." "Sibling? Taliesin, are you?" "About 3 months along, according to the physician. I wanted to be sure before telling you." Joy flooded through Cadogan so powerfully it left him dizzy. Another child. Another chance to do things right from the beginning. When? How? Why didn't you say something? "Just told you now. And I wanted to make sure everything was stable first, the realm, our family, us. But we're solid now. This is the right time." Cadogan pulled them close, mindful of the public setting but unable to resist. "This is incredible. Amazing. Perfect. Don't get too excited yet. Last time I was pregnant, you disappeared for 3 years." The words were teasing, but they carried real weight. Taliesin was giving him another chance but also reminding him what was at stake. "Not this time," Cadogan promised. "This time I'll be here for every moment. Every midnight craving, every bout of morning sickness, every kick and movement. I won't miss any of it." "Good. Because I'm going to be insufferable. Fair warning. I wouldn't have it any other way." They announced the pregnancy a week later, and the realm celebrated. An heir and a spare, the succession secured, the bloodline continuing, the future looking brighter than it had in generations. Gifts poured in from every territory, well wishes from wolves of all designations. Only Rhiannon's faction remained notably silent, but even their opposition had weakened over the past 2 years. Without widespread support for their ideology, they'd become politically irrelevant. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Taliesin hadn't been joking about being insufferable. They had opinions about everything, demanded specific foods at impossible hours, and became even more determined to work despite Cadogan's worried hovering. "You're going to drive me insane," Cadogan said one night after Taliesin insisted on reviewing intelligence reports at 3 in the morning. "Consider it preparation for having 2 children. You think I'm difficult now? Wait until you're dealing with a newborn and a jealous 4-year-old simultaneously." Can't wait, Cadogan replied, and meant it. Brennan was excited about becoming a big brother, though his understanding of what that meant was somewhat vague. He talked to Taliesin's growing belly, telling elaborate stories to his unborn sibling about dragons and adventures and all the games they'd play together. Think they can hear me? He asked one evening. Maybe, Taliesin signed. But even if they can't hear yet, I bet they can feel that you love them already. I do love them. Even though they're still tiny and inside you. That's what being family means. Loving each other even when we're tiny. Even when things are hard. Even when we make mistakes. The simple wisdom of it made Cadogan's throat tighten. Taliesin had learned those lessons the hard way, surviving and protecting Brennan when they had no one to depend on. Now they were teaching their son those same values, but wrapped in safety and security rather than desperation. 7 months into the pregnancy, Taliesin went into early labor. The physician assured them everything was progressing normally, but Cadogan couldn't help the spike of terror remembering that Brennan had been born during a winter storm with Taliesin alone and unprepared. This time was different. This time Taliesin had support, the best physicians, comfortable chambers, Cadogan holding their hand through every contraction. This time they didn't have to be terrified and alone. Their daughter was born as the sun rose, small but healthy, with a lusty cry that announced her presence to the entire palace. She had Taliesin's storm-gray eyes and Cadogan's dark hair, and when the physician confirmed she was an Omega like her bearing parent, Cadogan felt nothing but fierce pride. She's perfect, he said, holding her with trembling hands. Absolutely perfect. Taliesin signed weakly from the bed. Told you. I make perfect babies. You really do. They named her Rhiannon, not after Cadogan's former intended, but after the goddess of sovereignty and strength. A name that declared she would be powerful in her own right, Omega or not. Brennan met his sister with uncharacteristic gentleness, stroking her tiny hand with one finger. She's so small. Was I that small? You were, Taliesin confirmed. But you grew fast and so will she. And you're going to be the best big brother. I'll protect her always, Brennan promised with all the seriousness of a 4-year-old making a sacred vow. No one will hurt my sister. Watching his family together. His mate exhausted but glowing. His son so gentle with his new sibling. His daughter already perfect and fierce. Cadogan understood that this was what mattered. Not crowns or councils or political maneuvering, but these quiet moments of connection and love. The realm continued to evolve and change. The reforms Taliesin had championed took root and flourished. New generations grew up in a world where Omegas could lead, where mixed bonds were normal, where the royal family itself embodied the changes they'd fought for. Years passed. Brennan grew into a remarkable young Alpha, already showing the qualities that would make him an exceptional king. Little Rhiannon proved to be as fierce as her name suggested, challenging anyone who suggested Omegas were weak or inferior. 2 more children joined the family, twins, 1 Alpha and 1 Beta, rounding out the pack perfectly. On the 10th anniversary of the disrupted coronation, Branwen called the royal family together for a private blessing. She was ancient now, well past 100 years old, but her eyes remained sharp and knowing. 10 years ago, the gods disrupted a coronation to set things right, she said. They sent an Omega and a child to remind a king what truly matters. And look what came from that moment. A realm transformed, a family thriving, a future bright with possibility. We almost lost it all, Cadogan said quietly. I almost threw it away for pride and politics. But you didn't. When it mattered most, you chose love over duty, family over crown, truth over convenience. That's why this worked. Branwen smiled, her weathered face soft with affection. The gods chose well when they made you mates. Both of you. Taliesin's hands moved. Even though I'm a silent Omega with no voice? Especially because of that. You taught this realm that voice comes in many forms, that power doesn't require words, that strength shows in how we protect those we love. Your silence speaks more truth than 1,000 eloquent speeches. That night, Alone in their chambers with the children finally asleep, Taliesin and Cadogan stood on their private balcony looking out over the capital. The city lights sparkled like stars, and somewhere in the palace, their 4 children dreamed peacefully. "Thank you," Cadogan said softly. Taliesin's hands moved in the darkness. "For what?" "For walking into that throne room 10 years ago. For not giving up on me despite every reason you had to. For building this family with me. For everything. You're being sentimental. I'm allowed to be sentimental on our anniversary." "Fair enough." Taliesin paused, then signed again. "Thank you for coming after me. For choosing us. For proving that sometimes the crown and the heart don't have to be enemies. They never should have been in the first place. I was just too blind to see it. You see it now. That's what matters." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 mates who'd fought through impossible odds to build something beautiful. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been painful, terrifying, nearly catastrophic at times. But standing here now, with their family safe and their realm thriving, Cadogan couldn't imagine any other path. Sometimes love required sacrifice. Sometimes it demanded courage. Sometimes it meant tearing down everything you thought you knew and building something entirely new from the ashes. But it was always worth it. Inside the palace, baby Rhiannon stirred and cried, and both parents moved automatically toward her room. Brennan had already beaten them there, carefully lifting his sister and rocking her gently, singing the lullaby Taliesin had taught him years ago. "I've got her," their son said, looking up with a smile. "You two rest. I'm practicing for when I have my own pups someday." And watching their eldest son comfort their youngest daughter with such natural grace, both Cadogan and Taliesin knew that whatever challenges the future brought, their family would face them together. That was the real crown, the true throne. Not gold and jewels and political power, but love and loyalty and the unbreakable bonds between people who chose each other every single day. The Alpha King had frozen mid-ceremony when the silent Omega walked in carrying his hidden heir. But he'd unfrozen to build something far more valuable than any coronation could bestow.